What's going on, guys? My name is Ian and welcome to another episode of Critical Review. And today on the chopping block is Dungeon Munchies, a 2D game that was made by Studios. And I've actually really enjoyed this game. The reviews on Steam are mostly positive, overwhelmingly positive actually, for the early access that I was given a key for to play and review for you guys today. So in this game, you play as a zombie who gets killed, is resurrected, and you look for food and other objects so that way you can eat and gain different abilities. It's pretty much a roguelike. And like most roguelikes, you die, you live, you have to come across multiple enemies, and the game is astoundingly difficult at certain points, and that's kind of the point. It kind of walks you into a false sense of security and then throws everything it has at you at the very end. I don't really have many complaints about this game. Everything seemed like it was built extremely well. Nothing really stood out to me as problematic. The character itself was extremely well developed. It was engrossing to listen to her story, as well as the enemy of the story, which we don't know if it's actually the enemy. Spoiler alert. So I don't want to really ruin this game because it's at a very fair price right now of $12, and since I really can't come up with any negatives, I'm just gonna say go play it. So let's just go over the positives then. So one of the things that made this game so great was the overwhelming experience that you had with the characters. Being a zombie, there wasn't much for you in the way of RPing. You just got to experience the game as it was told to you. You were just an entity that was a sponge, essentially. You got to absorb the story into you directly. So with that being said, your character is also a silent protagonist. You don't speak to Simmer, you don't speak to any of the characters. You just kind of have to develop things along the way. And there is a very decent sub-story there. There are skeletons in the game that are very proficient in telling you things and details about the past that if you're not paying attention, you might not just get. And that's exactly what happened to me. It wasn't something I understood until I found one photo in the game that really just clashed the entire story together for me in my head. And I actually had to stop and be like, whoa, there's a huge, bigger thing here underlying the story. And then coming to the final room in the game, wow, it just really threw dread and eeriness at you and really set up for the next portion of this game to be a horror 2D fighter experience that is going to be taking these fun, lovable characters and putting them into this gruesome experimental world and seeing how it meshes together. Now, it already became apparent in the game that there were some things that you should be aware of, like your own mortality. Now, with it being a roguelike, your mortality is fragile. You're not the strongest character in the world. It's your skill that determines how far you're going to go. And along with that, the dishes that you prepare to make your character stronger. There are a lot of things that you can do to make your character extremely strong, and there are a lot of things you can do to make your character extremely weak. Now, one of the things that you can do to make your character overwhelmingly weak is not match up the right ingredients or swapping out weapons without checking your dishes that are inside your stomach. And since you're a zombie, you don't actually break down anything in your stomach. You just have 5 slots that you fill with food that have benefits that give you perks. These perks will then push your character along in such a way that you will be able to be proficient in fighting specific enemy types or archetypes if you prefer. But not only that, but the game has a very good way of just building up your skills and building out your weapon roster so that way you're constantly looting and getting new things and building new things, as it were. This game also brings about a whole wide array of elemental types. Now, from what I experienced, the elemental types don't really matter too much, and they don't really change anything that's going on in the game. If you're fighting a specific archetype, usually you're either overpowered to that enemy, or your element is really just outputting an extra bonus of damage. It doesn't really change anything. But of course, you can clearly see in the stat structure that the shield and spear is actually one of the best builds in the game, along with doing a attack speed buff. One of the glaring issues that I had with this game was the end boss difficulty. It was just out of nowhere, over the top, as if it was heavily inspired by a Sega Contra-esque shooter where this game, once you learn it, it's not too bad. You familiarize yourself with the controls, and then bam, you just get thrown this boss that is incredibly difficult out of nowhere, and you just have to survive. Now, in no way is that bad. I mean, it works for this game because it sets itself up the entire time, throwing bosses at you that you can easily learn the patterns of and defeat if you have the right equipment to defeat that boss. But the final boss just kind of threw me through a loop, killing me about 5 or 6 times before I found out, oh, I just need to use a shield guard, use the spear, and try to lure the enemy into a wall or something along those lines, and then use its own attacks against itself. So by that, I mean when it goes into its bullet hell mode, if you can just kind of steer it into a corner and find a position where you can continue the attack and block the incoming bullets, you can time it so you can get a strike off and shield, strike off and shield, strike off and shield. And that was extremely useful, and I hope that kind of tip is super helpful for you in your playthrough. There are a few things that I would have changed in this game, but they're so minute that they're barely worth mentioning. So I'm just going to kind of roll through them as I can. There are certain points in the game when it's clear that they just kind of put our enemies there that were kind of a skill test. They wanted you to die there and then change your equipment and then come back and then fight to defeat these enemies to get through. But they were kind of overly difficult at certain points where they were almost like sub-bosses, and then you would get to the actual boss room and it was easier to defeat the boss than it was these enemies that were just grouping up. Not the biggest deal, because once you overcame it, you had like a huge sense of success, and it's not a gamble as much as it was in Pros or in, say, Strider, where you're just kind of throwing yourself at the RNG. In this game, you have a lot of things at your disposal of dodge rolls and dashes and distant type weapons like bows or magic staffs or spears versus swords, daggers versus axes. You have all these different options available to you to uncover along your playthrough, and you might choose a weapon that just does not suit fighting that enemy type. One of the issues that I had, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is they would throw multiple different types of enemy types at you, and one might be way better with a bow, but the other one's way better if you have poison because of its high HP. So you want to fight this guy from a distance, and the other guy you gotta fight really close up. So you have the dual weapon system, which is super good, but I feel like it needed an opportunity for you to offhand more weapons and main hand more weapons, because I found myself more often than not wondering if I could even do anything to the enemies with the limited range that I had. To say this was solely a bad thing is actually not completely true. To say this is even roughly a terrible thing would be pretty untrue, because it makes you think and it makes you have to decide what perks and which system you're going to bring to that enemy, and when you fail, it's your fault. It doesn't feel like the game's RNG is the thing that's killing you, it's your decisions, which is a wonderful way to lay out this kind of game. It makes you want to go and throw your head up against that wall one more time with a different set of skills and different weapon layout, and you never know what's going to work for you. So once you find something that works for you, it might work for that boss, but it might not work for the next boss. So you have to kind of go back and try something else. For me, one of the things that I found extremely useful was using the dual axe and the speed ability. The damage output was incredible, and if you balanced it with poison, you were able to get a couple hits off and then bounce off to another enemy and get a couple hits off and move through enemies rather quickly and move through the 8 areas of the stage very quickly, which is probably going to be something that I try in my speedrun. Dungeon Munchies does a wonderful job at laying itself out as an action 2D game, and I really hope to see more stuff from these developers in the long run, and possibly even full-fledged AAA title games in this kind of ratio of a 2D fighting action game. One of the best things about Dungeon Munchies is its constant jokes. It is not entirely serious, although the story is built upon itself in an extremely strong way. It's got its humor to it. The characters are relatable, they're comical, they're realistic, and it really pulls you into the story and makes you fall in love with the characters that you're seeing throughout the story. And you also start to gain an emotional connection to them as you learn their history. And you begin to learn why they're all spirits and why they're all trapped in this Eden, as it were. Since it's so difficult for me to give a game a positive review, all I can really say is this is one of those games that you just need to go pick up and play for yourself, and then come back here and drop a comment below of your experiences. And if you're not going to buy it, well, maybe check out the Twitch page. Maybe I can make a highlight of it and you can check it out for yourself. It's definitely worth the investment, and especially if it comes to consoles and you're a console player, if you see this game, it is definitely worth a pickup. I would compare this game to Katana Zero in so many ways, because Katana Zero and this game really throw you into a very strong and developed world, one that you can really connect to. Although, in my personal opinion, I would find this game a little bit more enjoyable because its learning curve isn't as high. This game is much more roguelike, which means that it's also extremely forgiving. So guys, my name is Ian, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And remember, these reviews are completely improv. I do them directly after my streams, and I just do a one-take playthrough of the game, sit down, play it all the way through, and then give you my review of my first impression of the game after a marathon sitting. And this game was absolutely incredible. And I'm going to try to put it in the description below, a link to the Steam as